the Amazing Women Speak podcast, inspiring and motivating every Black woman to own, honor, and execute her amazing, individually and collectively, as it was established at birth.
Good evening, and happy Sunday. I'm Crystal L. Gunn, and welcome back to season 4 of Amazing Women Speak. I'm super excited about all the things that we have in store for you this season. I am grateful for those of you who have tuned in for the past 3 seasons. I can't believe this is season 4. And I'm definitely looking forward to those who will discover these conversations and leave full and inspired. So while you're getting settled in for this show and the start of, again, season 4, hit the share button and share Amazing Women Speak so your friends and followers can get in on this conversation. And so Amazing Women Speak podcast started because of a conversation between me and my bestie, who you will hear from in a minute. And we've all heard the term raise the bar. And we usually look at that bar as something to aspire to reach. And society has created this crazy bar for Black women. And I think we feed into it as well. You got to have this straight hair, certain type of body. You got to look this way. You got to wear these clothes. Can't be too dark. Got to be 3 times as smart as your non-Black counterparts. The list goes on and on. But I coined this the bullshit bar because it's unattainable, unrealistic, ever moving, spirit killing, depression causing, and self-hate evoking. It's that bullshit bar. And so with every season, we start the conversation around the bullshit bar. And this season, it's going to be no different. But we will soar to new heights as we unapologetically reclaim power, space, and voice in a world that often seeks to diminish our worth. So let's get to the bullshit bar, transcending the game. But first, Michelle, I have to say it again. Thank you for saying yes to Amazing Women Speak and sharing your dope and amazing with the world. Welcome back, my friend.
Thank you. I cannot believe it has been 4 years and so much territory left to cover. So I'm excited to be a part of this conversation. For those who are joining us for the first time, welcome. My name is Michelle Harper. I'm a Chief Equity Officer with Evident Change, and most importantly in this space, I get to be the best friend to Crystal Gunn, where we get to have amazing conversations and get to disrupt the bullshit, change the narrative, and really think about what it means to be a Black woman in a new light, where we truly are owning our amazing. I'm really excited to have this conversation one more time.
So let's get started and see who we have here today. Catrice, ma'am, come on in and introduce yourself so we can get this conversation going.
Yes, I'm so eager. Hello, beloveds. Thank you for having me here. My name is Catrice Renee Goddard, and I'm a spiritual mentor and a racial liberation and healing facilitator. I have 12 different certificates, but we're going to focus on those because those I'm passionate in actioning. At this time, I'm also the founder of Transcending Global Institute, and we're an institute that offers wellness, consciousness, and healing modality workshops and initiatives to help us liberate ourselves. Our message in our institute is that consciousness is the game changer when it comes to racial liberation. So, yeah.
I love
the power of consciousness.
The power of consciousness. I love
Absolutely.
it. I love it. So let's just, I met you, hasn't even been a year now, right? And we connected, clicked, had some really, really great conversations, basically, or mostly around this work that you do and just empowering and uplifting Black women. And as we talk about that bullshit bar, right? Let's go back before all your dopeness, before all of this great stuff that you're doing now, right? What was the negative impact that bullshit bar had on your life?
You know what really comes up for me? It comes up around systemic racism. And it also, what comes up is what's happening in the energetic and the psychic field of the culture. Like when I think about growing up, there was like messagings and expectations that were full of limitations, right? I was in another interview actually, and she asked me when was the first time I became aware of racism. And that was something that was shown to us through a video in 4th grade. And I remember I didn't really know what to do with that information, but I remember that there felt like watching that. It was about Dr. King, and it was showing all these these different occurrences that had happened to Black people. I remember something like just energetically, the impression was stay in your place. And which I'm a child. So there's a lot of freedom, there's a lot of creativity. I'm still connected to my awareness of God and possibility. So it was a contrast and conflicting because I felt that I couldn't fully be me, be expressed in this world. I remember that program being planted then. And so when you say bullshit bar, I think about how I went through high school and not finishing high school, and there was no objection or expectation. It was like the statistic to just follow in the cycle of trauma and demotivation. And this is my place in the world. And it wasn't until I had a diagnosis, which led me to healing my body through food, and my consciousness started to expand, and I started to see like, oh, this isn't the truth or the reality or the path I have to take. I can co-create and align myself with infinite possibilities, even in this body, especially because of this body and this skin. I can transcend and actually create a life that feels good and healing to me. So yeah, I kind of ran it on that, but that is kind of how my journey was. It was a lot of the systemic cycles that I was born into, and just those psychic implants of the bullshit bar, right? It's more internal sometimes than it is in the physical reality.
So
go ahead.
Right, like yeah. So I'm super curious, right? Like so we both do work in spaces where we're looking at the impacts of systemic racism to marginalized communities. How did you begin to build your muscle, your capacity around the disruption, right? Like, and I feel like that's always the first step before we start thinking about dismantling. What are the ways of disruption that you found yourself leaning into? Because like this is some bullshit and I'm not here for it.
Wait, Michelle, say the beginning of the question again.
So like at what point did you start to recognize, right? Like here are the ways in which I am going to intentionally disrupt this system.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. That's a daily thing. So it came with when I was diagnosed with fibroids, and the responses from the doctors were, it's very common in Black women. It's just something that happens. You'll have a hysterectomy and you'll be fine. And I was really young. I was single. I didn't have children. And something in that experience felt like whenever somebody says this just always happens to your community, it's part of what's just going to happen, Catrice. Like you have to eat that. You have to sit with that. And that's never really set with me. And so life would have it that I ran into a raw vegan chef in Eastern Market, a little white woman down there throwing down. And she introduced me to raw food and veganism. And as I started to heal my womb, I was noticing another version of myself was emerging. I'm more grounded. I'm clearer. I'm less defensive. I feel more compassionate. I am more inspired. And I'm like, wait, so that connection between food and how I was showing up in the world. And then my thoughts started to expand. I was working at Motor City Casino at that time. I was just starting to think higher, like, okay, what can I do outside of this? What else is possible in the world? But when I was inundated with the foods, the processed foods, the processed sugar, the just not knowing, I think at that time my diet composed of like lean cuisine, a yogurt from McDonald's, Diet Pepsi, a donut here and there. And when I started learning the effects those things was just having on my mind and my emotions and my body, that was the greatest disruption. I feel like I always say wellness is a liberation tool. I cut a chain. I remember going to the doctor, and he was asking me about my grandmother's health, my mother's health, who has diabetes, who had that. And I said, I'll tell you, but I won't have what they have because I don't think like they think. I don't do the same exercises that they do. My life, I'm changing the bloodline with the lifestyle that I'm living now, right? And at that time, this was like 2009. They didn't really want to hear that. Now it's tons of books out on genetics and how you become the generation, the curse breaker, right? The cycle breaker of that. And so disruption for me is through wellness, through food, keeping my mind clear, keeping my emotions stable, allowing myself to be fully expressed and feel in life and not numbed out and addicted to foods and sugars, and a part of that system that also has penetrated our community. Yeah. So food is my disruptor for sure.
It's so interesting that you noticed or can trace back to such a young age where you talked about those films. Because even when Michelle and I first had this conversation about the bullshit bar, it was in our adult life. Like we were talking about things in the adult life, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm also going to ask Michelle this, like, how did it, and Michelle, it may have been a little different from you because you were an Army baby, so you were all over the world. But how did you even see that bullshit bar in other places of the globe when you were little? And then that same question to you: how did you disrupt it and say, "Yeah, I'm not with this. I'm not doing this"?
Yeah. So, how the world views the United States, like that's real, right? Like, so no, I did not experience that in the places in which I lived. It was so awakening because it was so clear when I came back to the United States, right? Like, this is just different.
Yeah.
The way I'm seen as a woman, right? Like all of these things, all of the identities that I was raised to hold dear, right? Like they just weren't seen. We were invisible, told to be grateful for the small things, right? Or if because I spoke well, because of this, right? Like European education I have, we're going to let you in the room, right? And so when I started looking at all of the spaces I was in, right, like Crystal, when we talked about it, and I was one of one, like, what is happening? And why is it that there's not another Black woman reaching for me? We got to change the conversation. So the disruption for me was, how do we start paying attention to each other in a world where we've been told, right, like, I got mine, you get yours. And we really aren't going to celebrate one another and encourage and uplift one another. We're going to do the opposite. We're going to tear each other down. And so for me, that's a space where disruption came. And then having two beautiful Black girls, a beautiful Black goddaughter, right? Like the conversation had to be different. And that's where I rooted myself in, like, this is the work I'm going to do. This is the reason why I'm going to do it. And I would love, Catrice, to hear you answer that question about when they asked you, right, like about racism. Like, what was your response? Like, I love that question. I get it all the time. Would love to hear how you responded to that question, because it is the very thing that we have to consider every single day. Right? Like, we don't get to turn it off, right? Like, we don't even get to dim the light, because every time I show up, I'm Black. Before you see anything else, you see my Blackness. And so you're already going to have a story the minute I walk into the room.
Yes. You said so much in that. So much. Wait, I just want to feel into it. Was when you were speaking about everything that you've been told to hold dear. And then you come to America and it's not honored. And that is such a huge contrast, I feel, as Black women. So many narratives that are around who we are And it's the very thing that is so majestic and powerful and wise and beautiful and competent about who we are is distorted in this society.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a power that just came up, inspiration when you said that. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah, you said the question when they asked me when was the first time I heard about racism as a child, just in that, is still which is something when you think about it. I don't know if anybody, even back then when I was young, I don't know that conversation is being had in any community in a very forthcoming, transparent way that includes like tools and resources to help people navigate, because children are still being born, right? And I think giving them the conversations that the police might hurt you is not the full spectrum. So I can see like there's a opening and an invitation for us there. But just like you, marrying, being the only Black person in the room all the time, and then it kind of feels like, as well, like you said, why aren't we reaching for one another? And then there's also, because I'm an energy medicine practitioner, so I'm very sensitive to like pattern recognition and energy, that also sometimes the communities, it's almost like is there enough for more than just one, right? Like there's that scarcity is there. Can it be 5 Black people instead of one? And whatever comes up around that. And so how much work had these predominantly non-Black communities done where they have an energy field and a real authentic welcoming to all people, right? So that it's not feeling like I have this one coveted Black space.
Correct. Right. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's really, I think that's a big piece. And then it comes back to me, Transcending the Game is all about transcending within our consciousness, holding and nurturing and honoring, like you said, those aspects of who we are as Black people. Honoring that is the transcendence to me, right? No matter what this world and their bias and their stories, knowing who you are at the core is the game changer. And it allows you to kind of move through and navigate your daily life from an empowered place, understanding that the way people are responding to us is through their conditioning and through programming and not who I am. So I can sit solid in who I am because I've done years of work, obviously, but that is what I want to offer to our community is like, how can we expand in our consciousness and in our self-identity and be so strong in the beauty of who we are that we can navigate these waters without them impacting us in a negative way.
Yeah, so one of the things that I really love about these conversations, right, are the folks who are joining us on many platforms, dropping questions and comments, right, in the chat. And so at the top of the hour, for folks that are joining for the first time, I listed one of the things in which I do in this world, right, like as a chief equity officer. The other thing that I need to get better about lifting up is that I do personal training, right? And so I'm hoping all of my clients are listening, because Alicia dropped something in the chat that I want to back you up to, Catrice, and that's food as a disruptor, right? Like historically, our people, we gather around food, soul food, and it becomes this love language that has been killing us, right? And so I'm constantly having conversations with my clients about how you're fueling your body. And because again, the ways in which we've been socialized and what that connection to food means, the idea that you discovered it as a disruptor, how did you begin to change that narrative, especially as it was connected to your health, that practicing a raw vegan lifestyle shifted the way that you thought about food, and that you used it to empower you versus like we soothe with food. We feed our comforts and our discomforts, right? Like we celebrate, we mourn everything around food in a way that literally is killing us. So talk to us about that food as a disruptor, how you identified that that was the thing that you needed exploring.
Yeah.
Hats off to the little white lady. And I know she didn't do that. Right? Like I knew that, right? Like she was in the room. God placed her in the right. Like, so she was it. But talk to us about that, because so many of us don't have that relationship with food.
Yeah.
And I'll forgive you later for throwing the donut out there, because Goodness, and a donut.
But my view on donuts today is like it's interesting. What I noticed in the beginning on this journey, I ended up going to traditional naturopathic school and herbalist school and massage therapy. Like it took me on this deep journey in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And what was interesting to me is I was, you're learning, right? I'm learning. We did like a sugar challenge, so no sugar for 2 weeks. So I was beginning to experience myself without processed sugar in my life and then go back to it and see, and then, eat this and kind of see. And so I was like, oh, I'm more efficient without this. So in season, which was a vegetarian restaurant in Rural Oak, we would go there. And I remember I went with a client at that time. I was just doing my holistic wellness care at that time. And I ordered like a $7 cookie. This is the high-end vegan everything cookie, but it had sugar in it. And I remember doing that consultation. I could not remember. I was not as quick. Like my thoughts, I was just kind of like, yeah, I'll email you. And I was like, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Right. And so this is like my own personal journey. I teach it in this way, but when I started to see that this Catrice isn't as efficient, alert, inspired, like the depressive episodes that I thought was normal around my cycle, all those things started to balance out. And so and this is what's deep, really, Michelle, with your question, I had to reprogram myself and become used to health and joy. Right. Because I thought the drama of life, not knowing where my money at, getting caught in a pickle here and there, just all disorganized, which was very socially acceptable, as long as I had on nice shoes
Absolutely.
and a nice car, like I'm still the person. Right. And so I was like, but this inside life was not together. And as I started disrupting through food, I just became a more fulfilled, a more peaceful, a more clear human being. And so I got to the point where, people would say, do you want a treat? And depending on what it is, like, that's not a treat for me. When if there is, I still become overwhelmed, but now I have hacks, and we're living in 2024. So you could still have sweeteners and good food that's made with intention. And I think as a culture, what I love about this, in my coffee, I put raw cacao from like the Mayans I get from Etsy. So it's coming right from people, the indigenous people are making it. And then I have a can of rose petals that is grinded up. So I put rose because it's healing for the heart. And I was doing that one day and I thought about my mother's great grandmother who died sitting straight up in a chair, who did not go to the hospital, was always, self-medicating herself, working with herbs and things like that, and just thinking about her life and not having adequate shoes to wear outside, having a second grade education. And here I am putting rose petals in my coffee. And so there is something, I think about her a lot when because I've created this life, I've aligned myself. Like I've gone beyond the bullshit bar to be able to do that, to be self-made, right? I've done the things mentally, right? And actions as well, but it's an ode to her. It feels like an honoring for me to slow down in the morning, to care for myself, to be intentional with food because I have those choices. And that to me is honoring my ancestors, right? Who was in more of a fire, who didn't have the resources or the mindset maybe to do the things that I could do and take care of my body in the way that I do. So it's an honoring to myself and to them every time I slow down and steer my morning and choose foods that's really healing for my body. It feels like that's part of the spiritual agreement I have to honor them in that way. So it's not just food, like past one of my clients now is a young Black woman. She has a child. She is in an area where it's a lot of fast food restaurants. And she said, I was stressed and I've been working all day. and I wanted something, but I remember what you said, and I went and got like something from the Middle Eastern restaurant because you told me that's real food. They're still feeding their community real food. So that's our hack. But
Right.
she had KFC, she had McDonald's,
Right.
there's Checkers up there, there's all these things. And her doing that, I told her, you're transcending the game. That's somebody's mother. We don't need her really on Popeyes, right? We don't need her on all chemicals at this time. So to me, that is breaking the chains right there.
Right. So many of our guests, right,
Mhm.
went through a journey and they're sharing their overcome story, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so we always want to challenge our guests to slow down, put tennis shoes on that thing, and tell us more about the how, because right, like it sounds really good. And I want to do that thing. I just don't know how, because when I walk out my door in my community, there's a Popeyes, there's a Kentucky Fried Chicken, right? Like, what were the resources? Did you do journaling, right? Like, how did you finally say, yep, nope, yeah, that's not a treat for me. This is what it's
Yeah.
costing me. What were some of the resources? What are some of the practical things folks could try on if they were curious about, right? Like, and then starting to think about it, what are the ways do I apply that? So here's food. Now I'm going to apply it to relationships. Now I'm going to try it, right?
Yeah.
Like, what were some of the resources? What are some of the resources you can share with folks?
Right. And the resource, like I teach it. So just like I went to school for there, I would say you can get so much here, you can get things off the internet, but to actually have a mentor, guide, or programs or schools, of course, you're going to get the deeper knowledge as well, because knowledge is the key. So that's what I did. I went to school for 5 years to learn, to learn how to take care of my body and eat well. But like some of the hacks I can share here with them today is, in avoiding fast food or anything that's done fast. It's like, reclaiming your energy back from the system and the rush and the pressure of this society, is going to ethnic places to eat that are still feeding their community real food, like Middle Eastern, Indian food, like really slowing down and actually taking, maybe you have to go 6 more blocks or to another city to do that, but it's worth it. Also, and this is the biggest game changer, is eat real food. And so that means you have to really slow down, because they've made things so sexy now, you don't realize you're not eating food, right? You don't realize that's a non-food item like Chick-fil-A. Like, people really think that this is food, or like these French fries look like French fries, but is it real potatoes? So even when you're in the store, don't worry about veganism and all the labels. Just eat food, buy produce, buy beans, buy food, not things that are in a box that is already prepared for you, that has a lot of different ingredients in them that you can't pronounce. So never eat things you cannot pronounce, right? So in my class, I teach just to shop around the periphery of the grocery store first, right? Getting the produce and just choose food, right? Anything pink, blue, green, yogurts, ice creams, things that non-natural things, then your body cannot assimilate that properly. And so it will start to cause an issue over time, or even in that moment, it'll shift how you feel and how you're thinking. So eat real food. Me and my clients right now, we're kind of in that thing. I'm like, is that real food, or you're choosing? They go, oh, it's not. Because like I said, it's sexy and it's available and it's right there, and you don't realize that it is a non-food item, like Twix, or even maple. What is it, Mrs. Butterflies? I don't think it's any maple syrup in there at all. It's like there's no syrup. So right, so my clients, we go for maple syrup, like real syrup from a tree. So, and it takes a minute, but then again, it's that deep honor in itself. And Michelle, I love how you said, because then it does filter over to relationships. Oh, for sure. And I think about dating. I'm like, do you know how long it takes me to pick out lettuce? I don't know. You think you about to just waltz up in here? Like, I mean, no, like, your girl is intentional over here. So, and yeah, I think that's a powerful place for us as a community. Eat real food and you'll feel amazing. Like that was the hook for me. Oh my God. Yes, Tiffany, I mentioned Twix. Twix is not food. But But I got some. Okay, let's say this. I want to be real with y'all too. Right now, my class is in the second week, and so I'm really giving them all hats to, you know, snacks right now. They've not gone to the deeper levels of week 5 yet. And so there's I eat almond butter Reese cups made from a company called Mary that uses maple syrup as its sweetener. There's no processed agents in it. And so there are companies out there that support us now. So there's a type of a grain-free Dorito that I get from Whole Foods. So I'm still having this, these experiences, but afterwards, I'm like, I'm calm. I'm not wanting to go to sleep. I'm not irritable. I don't have road rage. Like all that stuff is diet. It really is. It really is. And my mother, she's on this journey. She's 70. I just want to share this. And she snuck some of my grandmother's candy. And she said, I was mean as a rattlesnake if I ate that. Because she hadn't had it in such a long time. So once you go off and you go back, you will the contrast will teach you. Yeah.
One of the things when we talk about the disruption, you talk about food as a disruptor. Michelle talks about holding seats at the table for other Black women as disruptors, right?
Yes.
But and you just mentioned the word that I was thinking was being intentional, and it's the intentionality, right? And so there's so many different ways that we can go about disrupting what's happening. And I think it's really, really necessary. So first, I want to say thank you both for being the disruptors that you are. Michelle, you've always been intentional about holding the door and holding seats at the table for other women. How do those that don't look like you, how do they deal with that?
Great question, right? Like I used to pay attention to white fragility. I don't anymore, right? Like go find you another white woman and cry about that over there. We've got real work to do over here. And that's just the reality of it. And it used to, like I had to build my muscle to use my voice in that way, right? Like trying to make sure that it's not just Black women, it's all women, right? Like that's the story that they sold us, like you got to include everyone, right? And I said, it's right. Like my mindset now is equity. As soon as we get some equity, I'll think about equality. But until then, we're going to try to create space where we are getting what we need to even get even to where you are. And once we're there, then we can change the conversation. Until then, right? Like the worst thing the world ever let me do is find voice. And that happened finding a mentor. And Catrice, you mentioned that, right? Like there's a lot of information, but there's power in having a mentor and recognize, like you mentioned, Catrice, like I have an obligation to my elders. I have an obligation to women that have gone before me to ensure that the generation coming behind me, the pool is larger, right? Like it's not this select place as it was when I started this work. It was really, really small. And we were looked at as so different because everything else around us was still living into the socialization. And so, I no longer pay attention. I don't have the capacity to care. Does not mean that I don't care about you. I have an obligation. I am accountable to Black women first and foremost. If you learn something from what we're doing, you can have at that. But at this table, you will eat our crumbs because we're the ones dining on the feast of liberation, of elevation, of education. That's what's happening at that space. I just don't have the capacity to care. And I used to would say something like that, and then I would say, but I love everybody. Right? Like here I am trying to create comfort in your discomfort. That's that bullshit.
And I feel I'm really aligned with where you are right now. And I feel like this is like a natural evolution that's happening just in the field as well. Right now on the earth, it's like there's a change in activism And it's coming with that, like being clear like you are, and not, and I'm in the spiritual community, so I see this a lot where somebody says something and they go like, but but I love and I'm like, I forgot. Well, don't tell me if you don't have no conviction in what you say it. Don't say it. Right. Right? Like if you like, okay, this is for them, but no. So, but what in like my teachings around racial healing and liberation, when I'm working with all white groups, we talk about authentic allyship and what that journey is. And that journey has to do with them holding a powerful space of support when they're not included. Like when you see all Black spaces, your role at this time is to hold space for those spaces, protect those spaces. That is what your allyship is, not to take it personal that we gather, but to really have your hands in the clay. Because for me, allyship is not about being nice and allowing or
Right.
accepting, right? There's a whole healing journey that has to come. And part of that healing journey is allowing Black and brown people to heal, and you all being a part of that healing by holding space, supporting and protecting those spaces. That's their role, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Right. And the conversation continues to expand itself, right? Because the way that folks weaponize language, right? Like, so to be an ally, like we are holding you accountable different than we did even 5 years ago, right? Like when you said you were an ally, I need to know, I can feel your allyship when I walk into a room that I was not in before. Yeah. Right. Like the work doesn't happen because I'm in the room. The work happens, what you're doing, how are you organizing folks when we're not in the room? That's allyship.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like I can walk into certain parts of town and get somebody to speak to me. I mean, you're my ally.
Right.
Let's have the real conversation. And if you can sit in discomfort of me being able to talk about your fragility, me being able to talk about your superiority, what in the privilege it is to be able to walk in spaces where I still can't, then we're going to have a conversation.
Yes.
Until then, right?
Yes.
Don't disrupt, even if you don't want to put your hands in the clay. I love that. Right? Like if you're not trying to mold some shit for us for tomorrow.
Yes.
Don't disrupt. Don't be in the way. Right? Like just go over there. Because we got work to do over here.
Yeah. And you know what's so deep about, I'm just focusing on white women because that's who I work with, but what's so deep about that I love to illuminate for people is like everything you just said, for them to have their hands in the clay and what you're doing when I'm not around, which is so powerful. They are also freeing themselves, right? Because that is, within the white race and the white culture and the psyche of whiteness, there's a lot of averting and pretending and a lot of hush energy. So a lot of their voices aren't really freed. And so anti-racism work is their invitation, and it's an opportunity for them to stand into their warriorship. So it's really their own evolution, their own empowerment journey. And that's how you know is right, because, I got chills when I said that, because it's something that's feeding all. You're becoming more as a result. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like, and the visual, right? Like racism is killing all of us.
Oh, yeah.
All of us, right? And so the moment you deny your whiteness because you don't want to be like them, I'm one of the good ones, that's costing you. Right? Like you're hiding behind, that's costing you. It's unfortunate that my people, our death comes from hanging from trees. But I promise you, it's killing you as well.
It is.
And there's a liberation that'll come for you, right?
Yes.
Like, and to be in spaces, and I'm sure, Catrice, you've experienced this, where they want to say, well, what about the other isms, right? Like the ageism. Like, yes. And when we topple the first domino, the rest of them will fall.
Easily fall.
Let's talk about our history.
Yeah, that's
Right?
that's not appropriate, because I don't know a lot of people dying because of their age, being killed and sought out and hunted because of their age. Now, there is a separation conscious in all isms, but this one is the hot one, right? Because people are
Right.
still in that program. People are still dying, even if it's not on our algorithm and in our timelines, due to the way that they look, right? So that, to me, that takes precedent.
Yeah,
But
right. Like I had an elder tell me, and I've been living this for the last 10 years, right? Like when folks try to challenge you, tell them, right? Like you don't want to play the oppression Olympics with a Black person. We get gold every single time, and we
Every.
aren't trying to win gold. Like,
no.
stop it, right? Like
Yeah.
everything you
Yeah.
add race on top of that, add being Black on top of that, and tell me where the marginalization does not increase because of the color of my skin. Like we get gold all day and we don't want it.
Yeah. You know what a big piece too, when you said I'm a good one and I don't want to be with them, and I can see why they would want to disconnect, but I always share that you really want to be white right now. Like this is your liberation moment as well. You want to own it. You do, because I believe like that there is a reason why you are here at a time that is
Right now.
not. Right,
Yep.
that you come to look at your culture and your race and transmute all that darkness and create a new lineage for your people. You're not just here to like just look at the history. No, you came here to alchemize. We all have come here to find our empowerment through all this darkness, right? You're not just here to take it and like, oh no, like just look at your role. Look what you're being called into. It's quite powerful. Every human being wants to be sovereign and empowered and know who they are. And this is just one of the avenues. And you know that it's important for people to respond to it, because the way they want to run from it. Anything you want to run from is calling for your attention.
Yeah. I often say, and you all know, I really come from the financial side, and I talk about financial healing and why we don't know why we operate the way that we operate, the survival strategies and all of that. And the conditioning, but everybody's been conditioned, right? And so it's not just us unlearning a thing. Every other culture has to unlearn a thing too, and they need to lean into the healing for their own people. And I often say, if the generational curse stops with you, then the new systems of success have to start with you.
I love that.
So for both of you in your areas, for those that are tapping in, how do they help to start the new system of success in what they do and for themselves and for their family? Because we can talk until we're blue in the face, and we have really, really great conversations. And as Michelle said, put your gym shoes on and let's continue to talk about how someone does that. One of the things that I want to say is you have to stay tuned in. You can't come to a credit workshop and think you're going to leave knowing all the things about credit.
Right.
You have to stay tuned in, because it's a process, right? You've been conditioned all of these years. You got to unlearn and relearn. So for those that are listening, what advice? How do they start to unlearn, relearn, stay tuned in, but also not get overwhelmed and not go back to the comfort zone, which isn't even comfortable in the first place?
And so, Catrice, I right, like I'm want to create space for you to lean into that first, right? Because education is the foundation, knowledge is the foundation, and oftentimes we conflate talking with doing, right? And the do never ever happens. So would love, because especially as you have built your work around transcending, right? Like, talk to us about that space.
Yes. Okay. So 2 things I want to say. I just want to clarify what transcendence is to me, because sometimes people can look at it as if we are wanting to go beyond and bypass everything that's here on the ground, right? In the physical, in the reality, in the circumstantial sphere. And transcending for me is actually a part of knowing the truth of a thing, knowing who you truly are, being in that level of self-realization and embodying that as you are active in the earth, in the world, with initiatives, with liberation for humanity. So it's not being so high in a way that, you're just so far away from everything, but it's having that core root of knowing who you are. Like for me, knowing that racism is a program and a condition, if not a dis-ease, it helps me to still see people as human beings when I see
Mhm.
some of the very overt and psychotic ways and sinister ways it has manifested. Right, it helps me because it's important for me to keep my heart open and clear. But sometimes I'm having to be in more of a fierce stance. But I don't want to hold anything. That's also part of my liberation as well. Like it's for my joy, right? My knowing and my comfort as well. So that piece, and then the piece, like you said about I'll share what I just did a year-long course in an online school with a predominantly white group, and there's some other mixed blood women in there as well. And what has come from that, and we do a lot of processes around bias work and what that looks like in their daily life. Like a lot of those women say, I don't even see Black people. I don't, it's so far for me. I had one
And I
of
believe
them.
in 2024, we're still hearing that. But
Yeah, like she said, but because one thing that's come from doing our work together is they've shifted from feeling like they have to do the work to they want to do it. Right, they
Mhm.
feel like this is an honorable thing and part of their legacy. And the action, because these women are entrepreneurs, healers in that community, they're all like, I know I cannot build my website or open my doors without anti-racism work being a part of that. I wouldn't have said that a year ago. I thought
Right.
maybe there's something I might do private. I don't really want my family to know. I don't want to talk about it on Facebook. And they're at that place. I have chills as I say that, and the chills usually lets me know like that is something that's really transformative happening. Their action is, this one lady just said, my last class was on the 2nd. She said that I just did my website, and as soon as you come on, the first thing I said, I do not tolerate racism. I'm like, okay, calm down. Like, what else is on this website? Like, but she has gotten to a point where there's no she's not tolerant for injustice. That's not part of her legacy. And so that to me, the action is, and I was telling this to the women as well, vocal white people is healing and is transformative. Like that is imperative. It may seem like a small things. Yeah, we did some reproductive justice fundraising, so that's an action step. But them using their voice in their everyday life with their children at dinner tables and their social media, and it's coming through authentic, and it's coming through from a very organic place because they've had a shift within them. That is going to be the change that is radical and regenerative, right?
Right.
It's not like I went to a workshop, now I'm going to do this thing. No, you are becoming a new being. And that is going to make all the difference. That's what makes us feel safe when we walk into a coffee shop. We feel included. That awkward, weird energy isn't there. There's a real connection. There's trust that is starting to be cultivated there. And this is a part of the conversation that I think has not been accessible to us until now. How this actually looks when people in white bodies show up in our vocal, and it's coming from an organic and authentic way because they've transformed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So very powerful. One of the things that we say at the top of the show, like this is the fastest hour of your day, right? Like, and here we sit at 7:51 and have not
Oh
even,
wow.
right? And have not even scratched the surface of what it means to really have this conversation.
Yeah.
And Chris, when I think about like what happens after we've had the conversation, after we've gotten a little bit of knowledge, what does it mean to put your work in tennis shoes and let's run? One of the things that really comes up for me is that self-reflection piece, right? Like you got to do the I work, and then
Yeah.
you need to check your tribe, right? Like some folks can't go where you're getting ready to go, right? Like elevation is necessary and God will separate you from. So as you're doing that reflective work and you recognize I'm ready for the next thing, you've got to look back at your circle, because are we in a room full of talkers or am I in a room full of doers?
Yeah.
And I'd rather be in a room full of doers with a silent voice trying to figure it out, riding on a coattail while I'm trying to figure it out, than continuing to be in a group full of folks that are just talking about it.
Yeah.
Nothing changes with just conversation. We've got to be able to do the work. And so look around. What are the folks that you're hanging with? What are the conversations that they're having? Are they in strategy planning? Are we organizing? What are we doing? As Crystal John would say, what are we doing?
That sounds like her voice, actually.
What are we doing? We don't keep talking about this dream. What are we doing?
Yes.
And so really thinking about, through the self-reflection, am I the person holding me back from the elevation? Am I the person holding me back from changing the narrative? Am I going to be responsible? Was in service today, and they talked about the ripple effect. Minister talked about the ripple effect, right? Like, so when you throw that smooth stone, and every time there's a ripple, you can ripple something good, or you can ripple something evil. You can ripple something that's destructive. What's your ripple? And if you're holding your rocks at a scarcity, like you don't want to let one go, you're part of the problem. Self-reflection work, right? Like, don't hoard the good that you could ripple. Share that with another amazing woman, because elevation right now is necessary. Stop waiting for somebody else to do the thing that you have the ability to do. Be willing to fail 1,000 times. That's where success will ever be found. Success will only be found in the discovery of the try. You will never achieve anything if you have not first failed at it. So that's the piece that comes up for me, Crystal, is really acknowledging, where am I in this? Am I in the room with the right folks that are helping me think about doing instead of just talking? And then let's organize and go get this shit done. Because while we do kick off every season talking about the bullshit bar, it needs to continue to elevate every time we kick off the next season, right? And so we should have folks that have been in the room historically saying, this is the thing that I've done.
Right? I love that.
And so that's the piece of it that's so present for me. So, Catrice, as we begin to wrap this thing up, tell us about the many hats that you hold.
Yes.
How folks can find you, and your liberation of joy around the many hats that you hold.
Yes. So folks can find me online. They can find me at Transcending Global Institute and CatriceGoddard.com. And my name is there in the box to find me there. I do speaking and facilitation, as well as group courses and private client sessions as well, around leadership, empowerment, and wellness, because we know that's the core foundation, right? Wellness as a liberation tool. What else did you ask me, Michelle? I'm sorry.
No.
No, is that it?
You got it.
Okay.
You got it.
Talk a little bit about Transcending the Game, the podcast, please.
Yeah, so Transcending the Game is about transcending all perceived limitations, and meaning all things. Like, I'll be talking about food and relationships, your own personal development, racism, activism, like all areas. I'm going to start off talking about the power of consciousness to transcend racism. So the internal work for the African diaspora, like what that looks like in our consciousness, making that a part of our collective work that we do, our holistic model of liberating, healing, and supporting ourselves. So I start that on Monday. Actually, tomorrow will be my first episode around the power of consciousness. And I'll be telling my story on how I've gone from high school dropout from Cooley High School, one of the worst high schools in Detroit, and to traveling and living out the country and moving to Malibu and building my own businesses. And doing that has not been like an easy thing, but it's been the most liberating, freeing, amazing thing. And I know I couldn't have done that without a shift that happened within my consciousness. It wasn't this world that was going to ever tell me that I can be who I am today. And so
We're definitely going to have you back. Would love to be able to have part 2 of this conversation. One of the biggest challenges Black women face is around relationships, right? So is it transcending to or transcending from when we're thinking about relationships and how we hold them and how we need to let go? So we definitely need to have you back to have
I love that.
another level of this
I
conversation.
love that, Michelle. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, you know, I just broke that down to make it a date.
Because what are we doing? Because what are we doing?
That was so good. But something just came up and I have to ask. I know we're running out of time. And I meant to say in the beginning of this episode that this episode was going to run over. I meant to say that. I forgot. It's because I had that Snickers earlier.
See, Crystal? Okay. I'm about to leave you a message on WhatsApp right now.
See? Because of that Snickers earlier. However, we talk about elevation and why we're here and the shift that we have and all of that. Why is it important? Why is it a must for us? Why, Catrice, is it important?
Why is elevation a must for us as Black folk?
Yeah.
Or just period?
Just individual, just Black people and
as humans.
As humans.
It's the natural order of things. Elevation is the natural order of thing, but this society doesn't go by natural order. It's a systematized place that likes to keep you in place. Oh, and I mean that on every level. Keep you in your place, in place. You notice, and Michelle said about check your tribe. As soon as you start thinking different and moving different, it's almost like a wrongness. Mm-hmm. How dare you do something that we're not doing, or the family didn't do, the culture didn't do, the group didn't do, right? But when we like detach from all of that and align with who we are at like the level of spirit, right? The level of our souls, then there's just infinite possibilities there. So that's the natural order of you being in alignment with the universe, in alignment with the divine, and the alignment with God. God to me is ever more growing. God wants more experience, more love, more expression. It's, God, the energy of God, the love of God is expansive. So if we're not expanding, then we're not actually like honoring our connection and really embodying it. We are more than likely in a system, somebody else's agenda. And so to me, it's about our sovereignty. Elevation is about reclaiming yourself back from the system and moving into your own sovereign expression. That's the point of living to me. For me to come here and find Catrice throughout all these narratives that has been laid on my plate, right? And me deciding who I am and creating a life that lights me up and that is, a catalyst for others. So yeah, it's a must.
Michelle mentioned the tribe and checking your tribe. And I think I've said this on the show before because someone once said it to me that, when you start looking at your tribe or who are the people that you hang around and talk to the most, and are they helping you in that elevation? And if they're not, you got to wonder, why do you spend so much time talking to them, right? Or hanging around them? Probably because it's comfortable and what you're accustomed to. But again, your comfort zone really isn't even comfortable. It is what you're accustomed to. But then that second level is, who do you know that can help you get where you want to be, right? That holds your hand and doesn't say, how dare you when you're trying to change, but instead they're over here cheering you on, saying, you got this, you can do this, and I'm with you and support you. And then that third piece is, who are those that you don't know personally, but if you could just touch the hem of their garment, right, it will help you in your elevation. And I think we have to seek out those and appreciate those that are our cheerleaders. And you don't have to throw those other people away, but really you need to check why you spend so much time with them. Because when you start to look at that and you start to check yourself, you're like, oh, okay, I'm spending so much time over here because they allow me to stay here.
Right.
Yeah.
Elevate,
who are your starting five?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Stop pulling folks deep off the bench and wonder why you can't win.
Deep off. Yes.
Right. Who are your starting five? And stop waiting to do the thing you were assigned to do. You don't even have to know how to do it to start walking in it. You figure it out. Like everybody's heard the thing is, okay, I'm gonna just jump and figure out how to fly on the way down. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
stop waiting to do the thing that you were assigned to, because if it's your assignment, I promise you, the how, the who, the when, all of that is going to show up. And before I just really dive into this wrap up, I mean, I guess this is kind of it. My daughter is in grad school for political science, of all things. And she had this paper to do. And you know how when you're doing a paper and then you have to tell your professor before you start to write the paper what the paper is about and all of this stuff. And they had to write about some sort of thing that's impacting, the community, but there had to be some sort of policy behind it. And we kind of went and talked through some of the things. And she was talking to someone that she knows, and she wants to make sure that in this paper she's addressing just how things still impact the Black community specifically, where it may impact everybody, but she wants to touch into that. And she was feeling a little hesitant about it. And her friend said, do you want to sit in the room or do you want to shake the room up?
Yes.
And I said, tell him, I just gave him all the high fives in the world. We're here to shake the room, not to sit.
Yes.
Like you talked about why we chose to reincarnate in this life.
Yes.
It's to shake up the room. And
Yes.
if we're not shaking up the room, we're not doing what we chose to come here to do.
Right.
And we're definitely not doing what we were assigned to do. So I thank you both for this enlightening conversation that I think will help us to continue reclaim power, space, and voice in this crazy world that wants to continue to diminish our voices. And I know with the two of you, we are not going to let that happen.
Yes.
I am Crystal Gunn. I am a Black woman, and I absolutely own my amazing. Shell.
What an amazing conversation, Patrice. This has been an honor to kick off this season with you. Crystal, we're back. We've been on for a little while, and the story does not change. I am so very grateful that you remain obedient to the call that God put on your life, that you are changing lives of women who have not yet been in a physical room with you. That means lives are changing. We are able to elevate and encourage and uplift one another because somebody touched the hem of your garment, even if it was by proxy of somebody else that knows you. You are a gift, and it is an honor every week to sit in this room virtually and have these conversations where you're committed to providing a platform where Black women get elevated. So very grateful that I get to call you my best friend, both on and off screen. And I think about this conversation and I think about your share around Niall's story about that paper. And are we wanting to sit in the room? Are we here to shake up the room? And so I invite every one of our listeners this week, pick up Janelle Monáe's Turntables. And I promise you, it will ignite you to shake up the room. Check out Turntables this week. I promise you, it will sit with you in a very powerful way. Patrice, again, it's been an honor. I'd share space with you any day as we continue to think about how do we disrupt and dismantle racism? How do we claim an anti-racist identity while owning without apology our Blackness? It has been my honor. My name is Michelle Harper. I am a Black woman, and without apology, and all the more, I own my amazing.
Beautiful. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you both. This has been a full circle moment to be in Detroit and speaking with you all, being here and sharing my voice and heart and consciousness with both of you. Thank you. This was so powerful. I have so many inspired ideas. They're just coalescing, coming from connecting with you here. So I thank everyone who tuned in. I will listen to Janelle, Michelle. For sure. And I look forward to returning. This was fire. This is something my soul needed. So thank you so much for inviting me. And my name is Kertrice Renee Goddard. And I'm a Black woman and I own my amazing. I got it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Amazing Women Speak is sponsored by the Amazing Woman Network, which was created to empower and unite Black women globally, focusing on the core pillars of reclaiming personal power, mind, body, and spirit, reclaiming financial power, and increasing our social involvement. Visit us on the web and register to join at amazingwomannetwork.com. I just dropped that link in the chat or in the comments. And find Amazing Women Speak on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Spotify, whatever your favorite platform. Like and definitely subscribe, turn notifications on, and then take a look at the past episodes. Find the ones that speak to your soul. You will find many. And then share them with somebody else. Be a blessing. You never know what someone is looking for, praying for, or have been asking God for. So be that blessing and share Amazing Women Speak with others. Thank you all for joining us this evening for the start of season 4. I knew when these two got together, Michelle and Kertrice, that the magic would definitely happen. And of course, the magic did. So thank you to the newcomers and to those who tune in each week. We definitely appreciate you. And remember, if the generational curse is going to stop with you, then the new systems of success have to start with you. Thank you again for joining us. And we will see you next Sunday at 7. So have a great night, all.
All right. Deep honor, ladies.
Truly.
Yes.